Good to go?
All right, Mark, go ahead.
Okay, good evening and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for January 6th, 2021. Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. For those of you who want to follow along with our agenda, and we only have one item on there, you can go to our website, livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the board tab, and you will see down to the right board information. If you left click on that, down on the left, you'll see a list and it will say new meeting agendas. If you click on there, you'll be able to see our agenda tonight. As indicated, this is really just a one item committee of the whole meeting where we're going to review data. But to start off, we do have item one, our audience communication, and I do understand that there are a number of those this evening. So Mrs. Jenkins, if you'd like to begin those, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, thanks, President Johnson. We have 7 audience communications received on our Google form. It's posted on our website, and this will remain open until we finish reading all that has been submitted. The first communication was submitted by Eric Longuski and Priscilla David on behalf of the Livonia Education Association Board of Directors. To Mark Johnson, President and members of the Livonia School Board. Since the COVID-19 pandemic brought in-person education to a halt last March, school districts in our state and every state have set aside business as usual and have done everything reasonable to best serve the educational needs of the students in our community. Here in Livonia, staff members have relaxed contract considerations and have taken on extra duties to ensure that our LPS students have the best options for their academic success this school year. The cooperation and understanding from our LEA leadership has not always been popular with a segment of our membership, but we felt that working together with the board and district administration was in the best interests of everyone and the only way to ensure that we finish the school year successfully. Administration's strong mitigation efforts, attention to child care issues, and relaxing of some norms have all been appreciated. The suggestion by board members to return to in-person instruction on January 4th, oh, I'm sorry, my screen bounced. On January 4th came as a shock to us. After facing the chaos of returning one building to remote instruction, then one level remaining in person while the other went completely remote, and finally all going remote, yet with plans to return for two weeks before the holiday break, it was a relief to hear the Wayne County Health Department's guidance for all schools to remain remote until mid-January, returning to school in person on January 19th after the MLK Junior Day. And yet our Livonia School Board has decided we need to return to in-person instruction on Monday, January 11th, despite the following. Since summer, the board has indicated that Wayne County Health Department guidelines will be followed. If their guidelines have not changed, why would the board choose to go against them now? Increased COVID-19 spread occurred in late fall at Halloween celebrations leading up to traditional Thanksgiving gatherings without social protocols that we know prevent positive disease spread. It was an obvious fact Christmas and New Year's traditional observances brought even riskier behavior. A new strain of COVID-19 is rapidly expanding in the US, and according to reports from the UK, spreads quickly among children and teens. Continuing remote until at least the 19th would get us in a better position to evaluate Wayne County and local data after the holiday period. The extra quarantine time would save us from returning to the buildings, only to have to close down again after the cases start appearing following the holiday revelry. This back and forth is hard on students, parents, and teachers. Delaying the return until the 19th results in only 5 more days of virtual learning, but it will provide 8 more calendar days of data collection and evaluation. Restarting face-to-face instruction too early could actually result in a greater loss of in-person instruction. As we experienced in November, a major factor for consideration in the operation of our school buildings is the difficulty created when teachers and students are quarantined at home. This compromises the quality of instruction with the overuse of substitutes who are already in short supply. Our teachers had the opportunity to speak with colleagues and students at all levels about their activities over the holiday break, and the stories shared clearly indicated that COVID-19 recommended practices were not always followed. It is a fact that many members of the LPS community were exposed to a greater virus risk. We also know how difficult it was to follow protocols and safeguards during the holiday season. It must be noted that the fear of contracting COVID-19 is not an irrational fear. The risk of illness and death is real. LPS staff members and students have experienced loss in their families due to this pandemic. This point cannot be emphasized enough. We recognize the pressure the school board faces in returning Livonia students to face-to-face instruction. We too share the aspiration to return students to buildings as soon as it is safe. However, while we are professionally qualified to educate our children, we should put our trust in public health professionals to determine the safety of those children in our learning environments. Watching cases begin to inch back up today after witnessing slow and steady decreases over the past 2 weeks tells us that right now we need to be cautious and conservative. We need to put the safety of our students and staff in the hands of those best qualified, the Wayne County Health Department. With the support of a strong majority of our members, the Livonia Education Association is opposed to returning to face-to-face instruction on January 11th. Okay, and the next communication is actually unsigned. It's from Anonymous. It's pretty brief. To whom it may concern. I was wondering why the Livonia School District Administration has not reached out to the Wayne County Health Department for a consultation meeting to review the current COVID metrics and risk level of spread of COVID in the community. Also, if your vote was yes for the children continuing remote learning versus going back to the classroom, what current statistics are you using to make your decision? The advisory sent out in November with December's data is over a month old. The advisory also ends January 15th. Thanks, sincerely. Sick of my children receiving less than an adequate education. The next comment was submitted by Rachel Diskowski. This board made a commitment to follow the recommendations made by the Wayne County Health Department with regards to when students should return for in-person learning. The Wayne County Health Department recommended schools remain remote until at least January 15th. As of today, the Wayne County Health Department has maintained its original recommendation based on data and trends. To negate the recommendation of the Wayne County Health Department during a pandemic is unfathomable and reckless. Moving in-person learning up by 1 week will make a minimal difference in our students' academic performance. It will, however, bring upon additional stress and anguish if we return prematurely, only to resume remote learning shortly thereafter. I urge our board trustees to recommit to following the recommendations made by the Wayne County Health Department for our students, staff, and community. Thank you. The next comment was submitted by Nick K. Excuse me. My son is in first grade in the CrossCat program. He is doing okay, but he needs in-person learning. He can't seem to learn from the computer. Please consider bringing these kids back to school Monday. The next comment was submitted by Jackie Weldon. As much as I know many of us hope that we can return to in-person learning soon, I just want to be sure that the elementary cross-categorical teachers and staff are recognized for the phenomenal job being done with the remote learning. The learning binders are absolutely perfect, and my daughter's teacher and paras are giving 110% effort. Thank you, teachers and staff. The next comment was submitted by Mike Testa. Regarding tonight's meeting, from my standpoint, the final decision and the reasons for why or how that decision was made are equally important. Like other things in life, we may not all agree with the outcome, but we can understand and respect a decision if the reasons and justification for how it was reached are clearly communicated. I look forward to the discussion tonight, and I'm hopeful that there will be a clear explanation of the details on how the decision was reached. Thank you. The next comment was submitted by Tariq Zedat. I am highly against back to in-person as long as we have too many cases, especially after the break. And then an additional comment was submitted on the form, which we will share with the board separately. And we've got one more that just came in from Murray. And this comment was on the section of the form requesting that it not be read aloud at the meeting, but shared with the board. So we'll be sure to pass that comment along to the board as well. And that concludes our audience communication.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. I also want to indicate that the board has received, and the community has been quite active today. We received upwards of 100 or more emails from various individuals, and I just wanted to acknowledge those and indicate that the board has read, if not all of them, most of them. They were voluminous, and we did our best to try and keep up with those. Unfortunately, I was not able to get to those to um, provide a response, but I just wanted to let everyone know who may be watching that we did receive those and we have read them, and we thank you for your input. Then we'll move on to item 2, our committee of the whole, and as indicated, this is the only item that we have on the agenda tonight, and it's a board review of data for return to learn. And at this point, I will just briefly turn it over to Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, President Johnson. As you know, at our last meeting in December, prior to our holiday break, the board requested that we look to move forward our date for in-person return, initially scheduled for January 19th. I know we've looked at the date of January 15th as part of the Wayne County advisory, but then we are off on that Monday in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and so it would be the return on the 19th. And the board had asked us to prepare for a return on January 11th, and that because that was still a number of weeks away, you had asked that we have an opportunity for a data review on this evening. And so we have prepared, as you know, we've shared with you for several weeks now the data that we track internally. We track a number of different metrics for both for Livonia, Wayne County, and the state of Michigan. And I'm going to ask Mr. Francis, who tracks that data entry for us, to review a slideshow that really summarizes that data that we keep on a regular basis, that I know we track daily and I know that you follow as well. So Mr. Francis, if you want to walk us through those slides, and then President Johnson, we will turn it back over to you so the board has the opportunity to discuss and have their data review dialogue.
Mrs. O'Brien, I think you're going to be sharing the screen, correct? I'm just going to end up going through the slides, pointing out what the items are, and not doing any type of interpretation, but simply noting what we're looking at on each screen.
Is it up?
It
It
is.
is.
Okay.
Just need to get it to the second slide. Thank you. So this is several items here, and it's usually easier to see when it's in the Excel form because it just goes from top down as opposed to side by side like that. But we had to do a little cutting and pasting to get the information on a single presentation screen. So what you're looking at is really those three blocks, the left, the middle, and the right, that each have 4 columns. It just keeps repeating, but the dates would just continue through. And we're showing here, first of all, and I'll take it the 4 columns far to the left. You can see the first column is date, then the daily number, and we're in Livonia right here. So these are the city of Livonia numbers of positive COVID cases on a daily basis. And this is being taken directly from the city of Livonia's COVID dashboard. So the daily number column is simply the raw number. As you can see, we have through today. They do post sometime in the late afternoon to early evening, and we were able to garner today's number in time for this meeting. The third column is the 7-day rolling average. So what we've been doing here, and this is a common item, is to smooth out some of the ups and downs of daily test results by taking a weekly average. So essentially, that third column, the 7-day rolling average, is simply taking the 7 most recent days, totaling them up, the total number of positive cases, dividing by 7, and just getting that weekly average. And then the fourth column, which is titled positive cases per 100,000 in the population, it's really an important item to do so you can compare to other populations. Meaning, if you're looking at the city of Livonia and only look at the raw numbers and say, for example, January 6th today had 49 cases, depending on what you want to compare it with, whether that be a town that has 15,000 people that live in it, or the city of Detroit that has 620 or 630,000 people living in it, that raw number is not very helpful. So we take the 7-day average, which smooths out the week's daily numbers a little bit by grouping it per week on that average. And then we set it against the population of the city of Livonia and put it up against and extrapolate it out to 100,000. So when we get to the slide a few pages from now and we look at Wayne County, it's the exact same columns with Wayne County's information. But when you look at that fourth column, positive cases per 100,000 in the population, you're looking at apples to apples. The raw numbers and the 7-day running average are clearly dependent on how many people live in an area. So we take it to against 100,000. That way you can compare apples to apples. So looking at that top line, January 6th, the raw number for Livonia was 49, but then when it averaged with the 6 days previous is 25.29. But then when you pull it out per 100,000 people in the population, it becomes 27, and that one actually happens to be 27 on the nose. Livonia has a little bit under 100,000 people. So in our instance, in our city's instance, they run pretty close. But when you see the Wayne County slide, you see the raw numbers are much bigger because there's so many people living throughout the county. So you can see we've put from November 1st through today on this slide, November 1 through January 6th. And those 3 sections are simply a repeat. And normally they would just be running down a page, but we couldn't show it to you like that on a slide. If there's questions on what is on this page, I'll help explain it. But again, I don't want to interpret anything. No? Okay, we'll move on to the next page. The next page takes all these numbers and just gives it a good visual. So here's the graph form of exactly what the previous page was. And this is the positive cases per 100,000 in the population. So that fourth column, this is taking that fourth column and putting them all on this graph. So all the dates are on the x-axis, and our number of cases is on the vertical or the y-axis. Are there any questions on what you're seeing on this slide? Okay, thank you. This is Wayne County excluding City of Detroit, and that's important to remember because there's quite a bit of population in the City of Detroit. So this in the City of Detroit becomes excluded by out Wayne County because the City of Detroit has its own health department. So even when you look up state numbers, oftentimes you might find the county and that's reporting out Wayne County, but you need to double check that, because if you take Wayne County in totality, which means including Detroit, the numbers will likely look different. The population size is obviously increased, and whatever the numbers are in Detroit get added in. We have been using what Wayne County Health Department has been producing and what Wayne County has on their website. And again, this is coming directly from the Wayne County dashboard, these numbers. So this is out Wayne County, which means not including the information from the City of Detroit, which gets reported out by their own health department. As you can see, just a quick note, and again, same columns, same items, but the out Wayne County, and you can see the daily numbers and the 7-day rolling average are bigger numbers. But of course, because there's more people that live, you're looking at many more people, which is why that fourth column is important. It's the equalizer. You can now look at the positive cases per 100,000 people and compare Wayne County and the city of Livonia much more easily because they've been held constant for 100K. Again, November 1st through January 6th. Any questions on what's on this page here? Okay. Again, just like before, simply a graphical image helps to sort of see the ups and downs of where the numbers are versus just all these numbers in rows in columns. Anything? Okay. This is the Wayne County, again, excluding Detroit, the percent positivity rate of testing as a 7-day average. And this is put out by the Wayne County Health Department. We've taken from the months of September, October, November, and December up through the most recent one. And they do these on Saturdays. So Wayne County will take the 7-day positivity rate. So how many people were tested in that week, Sunday through Saturday, and then how many of those were positive, and the percentage is listed there for you. So this is how they report it out. So we're just sort of mirroring what Wayne County's been doing, and it's each week on a Saturday. So they go from Sunday to Saturday. Are there any questions on this page? Okay. And this page here is what's called the growth factor. It's something that definitely needs explaining. As simple as it is, it also can be difficult to think about and capture. So essentially, we're taking the dates each day and what the average 7-day average of cases are. So this goes back to for Wayne County, and this is Livonia and Wayne County. You can see there's the two sections there. If you look at that column from the first slide and or I guess it's the second slide and the fourth slide, that has all the data numbers, we're looking at that 7-day average. And each day, for example, January 6th is taking the 6th, the 5th, the 4th, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 31st. That whole week's average is what that January 6th is, and it's dividing it by the previous day's 7-day average. So you get a day over day of what the factor is. And the key here, and it's written at the top, but the key is above 1 means that there's growth, and below 1 means that there's decline. And the best way that I can equate this would be to say, think about it if you have money that you're investing. When you take those dollars and you multiply it by 1.04, 1.05, 1.06, whatever that might be, you're getting 3, 4, 5, 6% growth on that money, right? Well, if you took that same amount of money and started multiplying every day, 0.96, 0.94, 0.89, whatever that might be, you're losing money every day, and the amount that you started with is going to be lower as you go day after day, daily losing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% every day. So in the end, when the number is below 1, we're seeing a decrease in the spread. And if we're seeing a number over 1, you're seeing an increase in the spread. And just like anything else, one single day or data point isn't going to tell you much. You need to look for that pattern or that trend running through the information. And obviously, if it's 1 exactly, 1.0 exactly, it's exactly the same. There's been no change at all. You haven't made more money. You haven't lost any money in that same metaphor. Any questions on this page? Okay. I think that was our last slide. So Teresa, would you take it back to page 2, slide 2, which was just the raw data of Livonia and the highlights? I didn't point out what the highlights were. They're really nothing particular or special. It's just the Mondays, just for your eye. If someone wanted to just take a quick look and say, instead of every day, what's it look like week after week? The one before that, please. The highlighted lines are really nothing special. If you look, they're just the Mondays. And it's just a way to say, if I wanted to look quickly at what each week looks like, you can do it that way instead of having to comb through every single day. And I guess President Johnson, my thought was to just leave it on this page unless anybody wants to ask to move it forward and back.
I think that's
the starting point.
I think that's fine the way it is.
Okay. Okay.
So President Johnson, if you want to have folks be able to take a look at this and share that, otherwise we'll have Fred take it off the pin because right now I don't believe any of the board can be seen by our audience that's watching other than those of us on the screen here. So I know that this is a data set that all of you have. So if you want to perhaps put a dual screen on your own so you can refer back to these, and then we can have Fred put us back to our grid mode.
I think that's a great idea because I have limited view. I can't see some of the board members.
Okay. So Fred, if you could do that for us, that would be great. So Teresa, I think you have to pull that off the screen. Thank you.
Okay, now I can see everybody. All right, so at this point, I am going to open it up to my colleagues for comments or discussion with regard to this new data, the updated data that we have. Mrs. Burton?
I imagine we'll have quite a few comments tonight, but I will go ahead and lead off and throw my thoughts into the ring, and we'll go from there. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Francis. Phil Francis kept us updated on all of these data points nearly every day through the Christmas holiday. And I'd like to assure the public that we were monitoring this. We have been daily for some months now, but even over the holidays. So thank you very much, Phil, for taking a chunk of your vacation time, because this is all information that was found from different sources. But to keep consistent data in front of us was important, and it's appreciated. As President Johnson mentioned, we have gotten well over 100 emails just today alone, and in the hundreds in the weeks preceding and months preceding, dealing with this very topic. One question that I seem to be getting a lot is, why are we looking at this decision again at this point? This board committed at the very beginning of the pandemic, as we had with any other topic we approach, that we will continue to study the data. Certainly with something like this pandemic, we have to continue to study the data because it's changing. We certainly hope it was changing, because when we started out in March and April, it was awful. And we've gone through ups and downs through this pandemic, but we absolutely have to, and this board is committed to studying the data and making sure that we are making data-informed decisions. When we made a decision on November 23rd to postpone our in-person schooling and go to a fully remote, to pivot to a fully remote educational offering, we made that decision on November 23rd, when we were at a high point. At that point, Livonia had 71 cases that week, was an average in one of the days. That was exceedingly high. I think it was a responsible decision to go to a remote learning at that point. But we did at that point say that decision that we made that night was going to carry us for 2 months. A lot can happen in COVID in 2 months. We made the commitment that night when we made that decision to continue to monitor the data regularly and to reassess as we go along. That is exactly what we have done. At our December 14th meeting, we saw that those Livonia numbers had gone from that high of 71 at one point, had already been cut significantly, and they were dropping by an average of 10 per week. So we, at that point, said we're going to potentially send our students back to school January 11th, pending this data, the very data that we're looking at tonight. So I don't want anyone in the public to think that this is a last-minute decision or a short-sighted decision or something we have not thought about carefully. This decision was, whatever we do with this decision tonight, we are reassessing a decision that we made on December 14th. What we wanted to do at that point was, at December 14th, we decided we will go ahead and bring our students back on January 11th, again, pending the data. So we are not for a moment making decisions on a whim or short-sighted or with short notice. We are continuing to watch this data, and we will continue to make data-informed decisions for our students and our staff. Livonia numbers, when we made the decision in November, 2 months ago, to push our in-person learning off until January 19th, we primarily were looking at two things, and that is the number of COVID cases in the Livonia community was at a very high number at that point. We wanted to bring that number down because that number does affect our schools. Also, the number of close contact quarantines that we had in our schools, even though we didn't have a high number of COVID cases, we had a very high number of close contact quarantines, meaning students or staff who had been exposed and therefore had to be out of school for 2 weeks. That number was growing to an alarmingly high number. So those are two very significant pieces that we have been watching to see if we can bring those down. Now, the Livonia numbers we can find easily. They're public numbers, and as Mr. Francis said, they're updated daily. We can't monitor our close contact quarantines right now because all of our students have since been home. But our Livonia numbers have been looking much, much better. Again, we've gone from numbers that were at the point we made this decision, the high was 71 that week on the chart that we just looked at. The Livonia numbers right now have been hovering in the low 20s as far as a 7-day average per day. So we've literally cut that number almost into a third of what it had been in November, which is why we're looking at our students going back to school. If our Livonia community had not been able to successfully bring those COVID numbers down, speaking for myself, I would not be looking at sending our students back to school. But what we as a school district community set out to do, we're accomplishing, which is why it's something that I believe we should be looking at right now. We have been inundated with email asking us to put safety first. And this is a statement that I've made for months now. We absolutely are putting safety first, but it's important to know that safety looks different to different people depending on what their family and their student needs. There's of course COVID safety, but there's also academic safety, meaning how well students are doing at home academically, because this is many, many months of this obviously now. There's social and emotional safety and mental health safety. There are safety measures for our special needs students, which are unique from some of our general education students. So these safety measures are looking different to different families based on what their student or their staff member needs. So safety is number one, but safety looks different to different people. Right now, to respond to people's needs for safety, we are being implored all over the board. People literally are begging us to send children back to school, and people are literally begging us not to send children back to school in the same day, in the same sitting of reading emails, and by the dozens on both sides. We've received a range of requests. Everything from send all students back on January 11th to keep all of the students out through the end of the year. And the whole gamut. A lot of folks want us in on the 11th, a lot want us in on the 19th, a lot want us in at the end of the semester, and some pushing it out to the end of the year. We have to educate our students, and we have to educate them in the best way that we can safely do so. One thing that we were looking for when we were looking at the data is potential spikes after the holidays. And frankly, I expected to see them. It was interesting, and when you digest this data on a day-by-day basis, we actually did not see spikes following Thanksgiving and following Christmas. We haven't seen spikes right now following New Year's. We have seen after each one of those holidays, we went through about a 2-day period where the numbers that had been declining went up slightly, and then they continued to decline, which is why that overall graph is continuing to go down. It's significant to me that we've not seen those expected spikes. What we have heard a lot of, especially in this last couple of days, is that a number of our community members have not been as careful over the New Year's holiday as they may have been over Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is a bit surprising to me, especially around when you compare it to Christmas. But we are hearing a lot of this, which is distressing. We're hearing more of it amongst our secondary students and their families than amongst our elementary students and their families. One thing that I would think that we should potentially consider tonight, we're hearing overwhelmingly that elementary students and families are wanting their students to be back in the classroom, and that is an area that had fewer close contact quarantines when we went remote in November, and those students don't mix and mingle classes on a daily basis. I'm more comfortable right now with the Livonia data going down so low from the 70s into the 20s. I'm more comfortable sending our elementary students back on January 11th but I'm having some pause regarding our secondary based on the information that we've been receiving over the last couple of days. And I'm wondering if we may want to reconsider our secondary students not going back to school until the 19th. That is a thought that I have at this point based on the data that we're looking at and the community information that's being provided to us. But I would like to throw that out there as an option and see what my fellow board members see or suggest.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Mr. Centers.
Thank you. I do want to share that I do appreciate, before the meeting today, I was catching up on a lot of emails, and I did not get a chance to write very many people back. There is obviously a lot of needs on both sides. There's needs for students to get back. A lot of students are struggling. There's needs of, there's been some pretty recent incidents of COVID affecting our students and staff, and that has got people anxious. So I understand both of those perspectives really well. Mrs. Burton is absolutely correct that we have seen a pretty steady decrease from where our numbers were, and I think that's really encouraging. Just the last couple of days, including today's data, we have seen a little bump, and I am curious if that is just a small bump or if that may be part of a bigger trend. I'm hoping that that is just a small bump, probably due to some of the incidents that have been reported to us about more active people on New Year's. That would make sense in the time frame. So knowing that what we know about elementary students, and from our own experience, seeing how close contacts, how many we had at the secondary level compared to the elementary level, I think that it's wise to give secondary another week, while elementary are probably in a much better position to go back this coming Monday. This also presents challenges for families. On the elementary level, it's understandably more difficult to find childcare sometimes compared to the secondary level where students are older. So I think that is well thought out. It does give us a chance to get those elementary students in who are most challenging learners. But I would also like to think that while we send elementary back, we also perhaps consider sending special education students back as well, because those groups are smaller, tend to work in smaller groups. They're not in as large of classrooms that we would normally have, that allows for some additional spacing and precaution. So I know that those two groups are particularly in need of some in-person instruction, and considering the data and what we're looking at, I think I would agree with Mrs. Burton that that's a prudent move, but with also the suggestion of looking at special ed perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Johnson. I too would like to thank those who've been helping us stay on top of the data and keep track of what's been happening in the community and in the county and in the state for that matter. I do think that the idea to start the high schools, the secondary schools after the 19th, after Martin Luther King Day has merit. Those students do encounter a lot more people during the course of the day. So their opportunities for spreading this illness, even if they don't know they have it, are certainly greater than in the elementary schools. Additionally, our elementary schools, well, all of our schools will be making a transition the one that's going to go between Livonia virtual and face-to-face, where there may be some children who are switching gears on the 11th, that take effect on the 11th. And for our littlest learners, it can be hard to have so many changes in a row. So consolidating all those changes at one time makes a lot of sense. And I think it'd be easier for our learners in the elementary level to make all that happen at one time, rather than asking them to undergo change after change after change. Transition is hard. So that being said, I think the idea of having the elementary school start on the 11th, and with all due safety precautions, of course, and then postpone the secondary until the following week makes sense. Additionally, the governor has let us know that teachers will be eligible for coronavirus vaccines on Monday, the 11th. So I encourage our staff to take advantage of that opportunity, knowing that, of course, it's not an instant thing, but the sooner the vaccine is taken, the sooner it can take effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Bradford.
Oh, I think Mr. Francis had his hand raised.
I just want to, I apologize for breaking in here, but I'm getting reports that people are saying the city of Livonia's, I think the mayor has her updates, and they reported 78 cases. And so I've gotten some things in Facebook, et cetera, saying that the numbers don't match. The best I can come up with was today and yesterday added together equals 78. So she put out an update saying that there's 78 new cases. The math shows that yet what their dashboard is up to date. I'm on it again. Still says today is 49, but if you add today and yesterday together, it equals 78. So the mayor's update that says 78, I can't speak for her or the city. The best I can say is math shows that yesterday plus today equals 78. Obviously, if the dashboard gets updated tomorrow and it changes, we will fix our numbers, and that's what we would always do. But I just, if those who are watching, I'm getting some messages saying that it's on Facebook. People are saying we're wrong. I just want to come out and say the city of Livonia's COVID dashboard still shows that today, January 6th, is 49. If you add today to yesterday, and that's just my guess, that equals 78. So sorry to break in on you.
No, we appreciate it, Mr. Francis. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you, President Johnson. I do want to thank everybody who's involved in putting the dashboard and the information together. We do look at it on a daily basis, and we watch it. I would also like to thank everybody who has sent in an email or sent in their thoughts. I think that's really important for us to delve through those. They did come in fast and furious, so we're still working on reading them. I got sifted through quite a few of them, so I do want to thank everybody for their input. Because just to let you know, if you don't think this keeps us up at night, it really does, because this is important, these decisions that we're making, and it involves everybody, from our students to our families to our staff. So we really have to look at the whole picture, and we do want to do what's best for our students and our kids. Looking at, and I'm so happy that we are able to meet tonight to have a discussion on how to move forward and what is our best option going ahead, because we are always, as Colleen said, looking at the data. It's really important. Based on some of the information I've received and looking at the data, I do think it would be wise for us to take a look at keeping our middle and high schoolers back from face-to-face until the 19th, and take a look at all the data that's coming in. And like everybody has said previously, middle school and high schoolers tend to be more mobile. And so I think that is a good way to look at how we move forward. And I do think it would be wise for us, based on what Liz said, and I think Mrs. Oquist the transition from virtual to face-to-face was supposed to take place on the 11th, correct?
Yes, we are scheduled for the elementary students to make the transition. So for those that have chosen, I think we have about 224, Mr. Green, that are transitioning from Livonia virtual to face-to-face, and about 125 that are transitioning from face-to-face to Livonia virtual. And that transition is scheduled to take place on Monday.
That's
Okay.
correct. No quest.
Thank
You
you.
got the numbers. I was hoping I could share that, but you got you're that's why you're superintendent. Nice job.
Well, it's great to have so many people on top of things, so that's good. I think that would be a wise move to bring in our elementary students on Monday. And I do agree with Mr. Centers that bringing in our special ed would be a good segue into moving into face-to-face, a good time. I do see, looking at today's numbers, I guess when I look at this chart, I think about the stocks, these numbers are going up and down, up and down. Of course, it looks like they have trended down. I agree with Mrs. Burton. We have trended down really well here in Livonia. Of course, we do have other students from neighboring areas, and we have staff that come in from other cities. So looking at the Wayne County numbers is really vital, and it does look like that's seemingly trending down. And I think you have to really, like you said, there'll be some ups and downs. It's not just going to be a steady thing. We hope it doesn't just catapult up, which I'm hoping is not going to happen. But I think it's prudent for us to possibly hold off with our middle and high schoolers until the 19th. And I think it's a good idea to bring in our elementary and special ed. That's probably the route that I would go with if I'm so inclined to speak. So thank you to everybody again for the notes and for all your information. We do have the best interests of your children at heart, and these decisions really weigh heavily on us. They're not easy decisions to make, and we've been put in this position, with our governors giving us the green light to decide when we should return and when we should hold back, and we don't have a crystal ball. So we've never done this before. So I believe we're acting in the most prudent way we can with your children. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. Other comments from the board?
President Johnson, Mrs. Acosta has her hand up.
Oh, all right. Hi, Madeline.
Hello. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's tried to help me get up to speed as quick as possible. And thank you, Ms. Burton, for kind of summarizing the data that we've been looking at so far in making these deliberations. I had a couple of questions. One was in mentioning the number of students returning in person. Sounds like double of what's going out virtual. How is that going to impact classroom sizes?
It's a great question, Mrs. Acosta. And so we've been very, very, very cautious about that. And Mr. Green has literally done a classroom by classroom visit and work with the principal, but I'll let him summarize that for you. But certainly something that we had to take in mind very, very closely. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Superintendent Oquist. I want to compliment, first of all the folks that have been behind the scenes working on these numbers, the parent community that's been so patient during this time as we've sorted through these numbers. As Superintendent Oquist mentioned, we have approximately 224 students going to face-to-face and 125 going to Livonia virtual. Those students that are going face-to-face, what we did was we did an analysis of every single classroom at the elementary level of what their capacity could be, understanding that they would have to adhere to our mitigation procedures as far as spacing within the classroom. So Obviously, different classrooms have different sizes, so you may see one classroom have 22 as its capacity, whereas another classroom in another building at that same grade level may be able to contain 24 students. So that was our process, and then from that process, we then started placing those requests. And the great news is that we were almost able to place every student who requested to go back in person at their home school. We have some on a wait list right now, and I have actually been in contact with those personally, and Mr. Hillard as well, who's been helping me greatly in this endeavor. So that is our process. And then this week, schools have contacted those families with a warm welcome, welcoming them back to in-person instruction. And they're going to be joining the last session of this week's remote session if the board moves forward with a return on the 11th to acclimate with their new classroom. And on the opposite side of things, students that are moving to Livonia virtual, they're going to be invited into their new Livonia virtual classroom the last block of this upcoming Friday to meet their teacher before the transition moves forward. So it's been a very detailed process, but one that we believe is been effective, efficient, and obviously with safety first and foremost when we made those placements. So I know that's a little bit of a long answer to your question, but I hope that gave you a little bit of an overview of the process.
Yes, thank you. And then I wanted to mention too, if it's okay, that going into the school year, we knew that in order to have two options for learning, both virtual and in person, that accepting that in-person option would automatically mean that we would be opening ourselves up to have pauses based on new information and new data. So I think that just being mindful that that was kind of a decision that we took, having that, and I'm saying we just as families, right, community members, knowing that going into it, that this was a possibility. And so whatever decision is made today, there is still the possibility that there will be a pause down the road based on the data. So that's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. And I want to take just a moment to recognize Mrs. Acosta because she has completed all of her level 1 MASB courses to be certified. That is almost unprecedented that she was able to do that even before she was sworn in. So as on behalf of the board, Mrs. Acosta, we appreciate that greatly, and it shows your dedication to the board and to the students of this district. So thank you very much. All right, we lost somebody. Oh, where is?
Mrs. Jarvis has her hand up, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, I was looking for Mrs. Bonifield because she has not had an opportunity to speak yet. Would you like to do so at this point? It looks like she's trying to. There she is.
So my colleagues have all made much more eloquent have better talking points than I do. They've said it more eloquently. I guess one of my questions I'd like to ask is, we talk about the mitigation process, and before we went on our pause, my understanding was that there was no transmission of COVID within the schools, and after I'm done, someone can address that, and that I understood that the mitigation in all of the buildings was being followed closely, that the staff was holding the students accountable for their behavior, and that the students in the buildings, and this may apply more to the upper grades than the elementary, were complying, as they were very knowledgeable that should they not follow the rules, that it would mean that we would have to pause. So can I just like to talk for a minute, if someone can address what where the mitigation is, what the spread of COVID has been in the buildings or not, and how that's gonna how that affects us going back.
So I can certainly start with that, Mrs. Bonifield. Each time we complete contact tracing, and for students, that's done by Dr. Terriel and Dr. Dodge, and for staff, that is primarily done through Mr. McDonald and members of his office. And then they work with the county, and the county determines whether or not there is a connectivity or a virus transmission that they can identify within the school setting. And if they are unable to identify the origin of the virus, then they're not able to identify whether or not it is considered a quote outbreak. So if 2 or more cases are found to be connected within the same school location, that is considered an outbreak. And up until just prior to our closure, I believe we did not have any outbreaks identified, but I believe just before our closure, we did have 2 areas where there was what's considered an outbreak, and that can be as minimal as 2 cases that are connected to one another. Overall, what I will share with you is of the cases that were identified and the close contact quarantines, the overwhelming majority had their connectivity to an origin outside of the school. There were some that were not able to be identified as to the origin of that virus, but very, very, very minimal within the school setting, and that was reported to us via the health department. But I would invite Dr. Terriel or Mr. McDonald to correct that or to add any additional information, because I want to be sure that we're as accurate as possible when we're stating that. And the reason why, even early on, when we had no evidence of that, the health department resists saying 0, because when you have an unknown origin, you really can't be certain of that. So Dr. Terriel or Mr. McDonald, anything you want to add with regard to that? And then I'll hop to your mitigation measures question.
Superintendent Oquist and the Board of Education, I completely agree with what Superintendent Oquist just said. Overwhelmingly, the close contact cases that Dr. Dodge and myself have contacted were outside of the school system. So exactly what you said. Staff, I believe, Keith, you would say the same.
So what I will say is, Mrs. Bonifield, one of the things that continuously was reported back to us was a strong admiration and gratitude for the response of our students, of our staff, and of our parents to our strict mitigation measures. That was something you might remember. If it's hard to remember all the way back to July and August, but some of the things that we heard the most concern about were things like, would students adhere to the mask requirement? Would parents complete the screener and be cautious about sending kids to students to school if they were exhibiting symptoms or if they were ill? And one of the things that we have heard over and over was how impressed we have been throughout this district with adherence to those strict mitigation measures. That has taken a yeoman's effort on everyone's part. So that is from our custodial staff being diligent about supplying PPE and cleaning, to our secretaries being so responsive as they've managed the wellness room in each of our schools, which is a completely new process this year, to our staff wiping down surfaces between each cohort of students, to our students wearing masks and being respectful of those guidelines, whether that's in the classroom, on the athletic field, in the music room. And so one of the things that was noted literally each and every time we spoke with the health department was commentary and positive response to the district's strict mitigation measures document, which, as you know, is about 10 pages long. and something that our principals have studied greatly and have worked hard along with our cabinet team to implement in the schools. And so we really do need to acknowledge that that's been an important part of why when we were in school, we were able to be there successfully, was because of those mitigation measures. And that isn't on any one person, but it is on every single person. So that goes both inside of school and outside of school. But those mitigation measures are something that we've talked about. Whatever the date is for return, one of the things that we have immediately begun to focus on, really since the board had this discussion back in December, and certainly throughout this week with our school leaders, is the importance of revisiting those mitigation measures right now and then frequently as we return. So starting that remotely, but continuing that as our students return, as we begin to ask families to use those screeners each and every day once again, and as we get back into those practices. So again, I know that's a little bit more information than you may have been looking for, but I don't think we can underestimate the importance of adhering to those mitigation measures, to reporting to the schools when you're feeling ill, to not coming to school while you're waiting for a test. It is absolutely essential that we go back to that diligence that everyone was showing while we were in session, because that is what will allow us to remain in session for those families that have chosen that option. So a really important piece of it. We continue to revisit those, and we'll continue to update those and follow them carefully as we return students back to school.
So as a follow-up question to that, Mrs. Oquist, some of the letters that we received had grave concerns that the students weren't complying with the masks, they were congregating in the hallway, that there was, they had seen flagrant abuse of the policies. If anybody's in the buildings and they're not comfortable with what's going on or believe that the mitigation is not being strictly adhered to, how would they go about reporting that?
Do you mean a student or a staff member? Because really the principal would be the main contact there to be able to address that.
And are the principals open to that discussion? And I'm assuming all of the principals are very clear that if there are any issues in the buildings that they're not able to rectify, then they can absolutely go up the chain of command to make sure that anyone that's not in compliance be removed from the buildings.
Without question, I know Mr. Green and Mr. Willenberg meet very, very regularly with our school leaders, and as well as Dr. Terriel with all of the leaders in our special education program. So, really at any time, our team is here to support that, but certainly our principals are exceedingly familiar with those measures and fully supportive of implementing them.
Okay. President Johnson, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, if I could share, we work as a team in our schools where teachers and administrators and other staff members are all, working with students and their colleagues to make sure that everyone's adhering to the guidelines. So in a typical time between passing or before school, there's a lot of counselors, teachers in the hallway telling kids to keep moving. In the classrooms, teachers are reminding kids, make sure you have your mask up. And certainly if there's, we have very few incidents of non-compliance, outright non-compliance. Kids have been very respectful. So I've heard a lot of great things and seen a lot of great teamwork at our schools, regarding those mitigation factors.
Thank you.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Johnson. I just have two things. The first is a comment that no matter when our students are welcomed back into the classroom, we will still continue to investigate data every day. We will still be looking at numbers locally in the community as well as the county and the state. That won't change. And the second thing I had was a question. And hopefully either Mrs. Oquist or maybe Mr. Green and Mr. Willenborg will be able to help. The data, the numbers of the students who will be transitioning between Livonia virtual and face-to-face learning, do we have that possibly broken out between elementary and secondary students?
Yes, what we reported out to you was our elementary numbers. Our secondary students do not make that transition until the second semester.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Anything else from my colleagues? Mrs. Burton?
I just wanted to mention that this is one of those situations where there really truly is not a right or a wrong decision. We can just make the best decision that we can based on the information that we have at this time. I believe I'm safe in speaking for my colleagues on the board to say that we have all been studying this issue diligently since March and intently with this specific question of return date since November. I would like to thank and acknowledge the range, the folks on our staff, our parents, and our students who hold a range of opinions on this. We really do respect the passion that you're holding. We have the same amount of passion. I think that we all want the same thing, which is safe education of our students and educating them as best as we possibly can. We may disagree on what method is best, but I think that we share that same passion. And this is just one of those decisions for me anyway, that I don't see a clear cut right or wrong, because not everyone's going to agree, but we can just make the best decision that we can based on what we know now.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Mrs. Acosta?
Thank you. I had one question or two questions for Mrs. Oquist, if possible. I know that you're in communication with the Wayne County Health Department. Is there a way that you can share kind of what, how they're interpreting our data as well? And maybe share again, what options are there for families that opted for face-to-face, but maybe don't feel comfortable sending their students to school at an earlier date?
Sure. Well, we had a consultation with the Wayne County Health Department as recently as late this afternoon. So President Johnson was able to join for that call, as well as Dr. Terriel. And so unfortunately, we had, they did not have updated data. So the most recent data that they had was through last week. I did send them the data that we collect and reviewed this evening. So they did have that information. However, they update their data on Wednesday evenings and usually receive that by Thursday morning. And so they certainly looked through our numbers and stated, I think the quote was, our numbers are looking very good, but indicated that currently they likely reflect the results of the Christmas holiday period, but probably do not yet reflect all of the potential impact from New Year's. Certainly starting some of that, but perhaps not completely. And she's indicated that, they've seen, I think as Mrs. Burton had talked about, generally an overall decline over the past 8 weeks, which they felt was very positive. They did not see the after Christmas spike that they had expected, in that they're watching closely for the numbers that come in this week to continue to monitor if any blips on the radar screen, so to speak, are short-lived, or whether or not that may be, a more significant impact. At this point in time, we had asked if the health department advisory had been changed, and they had indicated that at this point in time, overall it had not, but that it was still a decision for local school districts to determine based on their local data when it would be appropriate for students to return. As you know, the governor in December did lift all restrictions through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And so the county follows that lead as well, and encourages each district to look at their individual data. And so they did continue to look at our numbers, and they will continue to work with us and talk with us through, and also shared with us that, which we did know this information, that the CDC recommendations of a 10-day close contact quarantine from exposure is now in place rather than the 14-day. And so that date is also something that they are taking a look at with regard to when possible exposures may have happened in the period of time. In general, they said, I believe 90 or just over 90% of cases they stated were exposure took place, and virus, if it was going to be transmitted, was transmitted within the first 10 days. And so we have since put that into our new screener for both staff and students when they return. So that was some of our discussion today. I don't know, President Johnson, if there's anything else you would want to add from the dialogue today, but those were some of the areas that we discussed, and they will continue to update our risk level status throughout this week as they update the numbers from their most recent data review. And then your second question, would you repeat that, please?
What are the options for families that opted for face-to-face but don't feel comfortable sending their students to school if the state changes to earlier?
So Mr. Either Mrs. O'Brien or Mr. Green, do you want to respond to that? I think Mrs. O'Brien is coming on.
There she goes.
Thank you. Mrs. Acosta, we have gotten several phone calls this week just asking that same question, and we have referred them to their building administrators at the secondary level, their school counselors, and we had several students in the fall, even before we went to a window where we were able to move students from face-to-face to Livonia virtual, especially at the secondary level. And our amazing staff and counselors and assistant principals worked with families as best as they could to provide students what they needed and supported them, that if they weren't, feeling safe to come to school, we did our best to provide them with, asynchronous work and teachers checking in and counselors checking in with them. So I would recommend that anyone who feels that they are not quite ready and they have signed up for face-to-face is to contact their school.
To piggyback what Ms. O'Brien said, also it's important to note that when the election that families had a choice in making in November about going to LV or face-to-face, we did give them a window when we returned from break where they could also contact us after break to make those changes. So some did rescind their request, and we were able to place them back where they wanted to stay, for example, in LV. So we've been also able to have that window for families because we do understand situations may have changed or their feelings may have changed on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. Mrs. Bonifield has her hand up.
So, Mrs. Oquist, you mentioned that the CDC has gone from a 14-day quarantine to a 10-day quarantine. New Year's Eve was December 31st, the beginning of the 1st. So if a student was exposed on New Year's Eve, which is the concern that we're having, and they were clear at 10 days, then they would be done with their quarantine and be able to attend school on Monday, the 11th.
If it was confirmed that that was the date of exposure, that is correct.
Okay. And I have another question. I know in some of the letters that we read, it was mentioned that we're only talking about 5 days. I didn't know if someone could maybe address for me, in particular, I'm talking about our K-6 and our special education kids. the impact that 5 days is going to have on our students. I think that's going to help me make a more informed decision regarding what this means to our students.
Dr. Terrell?
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. Anytime our special education students can be in front of our amazing special education teachers is a great day. As you heard one of the parents in the parent communication, our staff has been doing a tremendous job providing remote instruction for our students with special needs. So I want to make sure that that is well known as well. However, being in front of our teachers with our ancillary staff, our occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech and language therapists, our wonderful paraprofessional staff, all of that together creates that sense of community, helps with communication, helps with socialization, helps maintain that consistency that our students with special needs need so much in terms of helping them with transitions and creating that patterning. Again, our teachers are highly qualified special education providers, so I fully support bringing back our special education students, knowing the quality of teaching staff and our ancillary and paraprofessional staff that we have to put our students in front of. Also, in regard to bringing back other students in terms of meeting their social emotional needs, having access to those trusted adults, access to our mental health providers that we have in our buildings, I think is also extremely important. In addition to, again, the sense of community in those classrooms, the relationships that students have, that socialization and communication as well for our general education students is just as important.
Thank you, Dr. Terrio. Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you, President Johnson. Mrs. Oquist, can you talk about our sub staff and what will happen if we do need additional subs in the buildings? Have we done anything in that regard?
I would be happy to, and then I'll invite my friend, Mr. McDonald. It's kind of like phone a friend every once in a while here. So what I will share with you is this was something that was really high on our priority list since the summer. So I know some of you served on subcommittees throughout our task force work. And one of the subcommittees was focused on this topic because in all seriousness, this was something that we really had some concerns about, and for two different reasons. One, we knew that close contact quarantines would potentially require extended days of subbing for individual staff members. The second piece was, although we had made many inquiries and worked very closely throughout the summer with EduStaff, who provides our substitute teaching staff members, and they assured us that they had a strong cache of subs ready to start with us for the year. We were concerned that perhaps the pandemic itself would keep people from subbing and providing that important service and taking on those roles this school year. So a few different things. We increased our number of premier subs in the district by a significant amount. And so premier subs are subs that we pay at a higher rate, and we guarantee them work each and every day, but they are not assigned until the last moment. And so that way, if we have an unexpected need for coverage, we're able to utilize one of our premier subs, and they are placed at the last minute for those last moment situations. We're also going to be adding building subs at the elementary level starting in mid to late January as another resource to be able to provide some additional stability in that regard. Mr. McDonald, if there's anything else that you want to add, I know we've done quite a bit of recruiting as we've looked at our colleges in the area, our student teachers, et cetera, but I'll let you tackle that question as well.
I think you kind of wasted a phone a friend there. You pretty thoroughly covered that. Karen, can you repeat the question just in case there's aspects that Superintendent Oquist didn't answer? I'll make sure I tackle those for you.
Well, it was just basically, what are we doing in the sub pool? Do we have enough subs? What are we doing? And it sounds like Mrs. Oquist did cover my question so much.
Okay.
So if you'd like to add some more, that'd be wonderful.
You know, a good answer and a bad one at the same time is we really don't know on a given day.
Mhm.
You know, there's only a set amount of subs out there, and we have done a nice job, I think, of securing some subs as both building subs or premier subs that are going to be working for us every single day for the rest of the year. So long as our absences are, you know, controlled, that when, you know, we're staying healthy or when we're out, you know, it's necessitated by illness and we can cover those, that's great. I think one of the things that has helped us and looks to be that is going to continue is that a couple of our surrounding districts have not gone back to a face-to-face setting. So we have pulled in many subs from those districts who had normally worked for them. There's still a lot of subs out there that want to work. I mean, I can see a former sub right here on our screen, who I know worked many days for us. So of our subs really love our kids and they want to be there as well. So I know many of them are excited to see our kids again. So you know, we're hopeful and we're fairly confident that we've done a great job in recruiting and securing these subs. We have building principals and staffs that treat our subs with respect. They help them out when they're there. They make them feel welcome and like part of our team, and that helps bring them back. And you know, as long as we're able to continue that, I think we'll do all right.
Thank you. One other thing I just want to make a comment on, we are entering the mid-year point in our year, and I do want to recognize the amazing staff and administration that we have right now. I know these are tough times for our teachers, no doubt about it. They come to work every day and are going above and beyond to service our kids remotely, face to face, whatever we ask, they just step up, and I'm amazed. Even though my kids aren't in the buildings, I keep a close watch on different forms of media and the photos and just the creativity that our staff puts together every day is wonderful, and I think they should be acknowledged for that. I realize that these are hard times, obviously, and uncharted territory, and I'm just really grateful for everybody's hard work that they do on a daily basis. And again, we're asking a lot of everybody, not only our staff but our families, to buckle down and stay safe and don't come to school if you don't feel well, and follow all these mitigation measures. And we're asking our staff to do the same. And I just want to recognize, how hard everybody works. It does take a big team effort to do this. And again, we're working under some pretty hard constraints, but I'm just proud of all the work and effort that everybody's put in so far. And I know we can make it through the rest of the year. If we just got to keep at it and keep working hard. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. Any other comments? As I've said on many occasions, going last really leaves me with very little to say because my colleagues have laid out a very compelling argument. A couple of things I would like to add, though, and again, at the beginning of this, we said that we would follow the data, and that would be all of the data, not just a little bit of it, not just pick and choose. But all of the data that we see, and we've done that. We've been very sensitive to it. We've been reactive to it as we've gone through. And I want to thank Mrs. Oquist for bringing up. I had one of my notes to indicate that we do have consultation with the health department. I know that there was a mention earlier that we need to do that. And we do that. It's on a regular basis. Trust me, and and you were accurate in your statement as to what went on during that conversation. It was completely accurate what they brought forward. And I also wanted to make sure that uh, perhaps getting lost in some of this, we talked about the original pause from the end of November, but there was an order that came from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services on the 18th of December that opened up pre-K through 12 to in-person learning. To my knowledge, that order has not been rescinded and it hasn't been changed. But on the other hand, we've watched the data to see what it has said. And even when we were together on the 14th of December, we indicated that we were going to see where this takes us. We had a goal in mind, and but we said that things could change. And again, we've been reactive to that. And I appreciate Mrs. Burton's laying out her thoughts. I think it's a reasonable alternative at this point that we bring back our elementary and our special education students, and then just delay our secondary students another week, because as Mrs. Burton indicated, it really seems to be that was the focus. It wasn't so much at the K-6 levels. It was the upper grades that if there was any, what I'll just call concern, it was there. So I think this is a reasonable alternative. And unless my colleagues have anything to add, hopefully that gives you some direction moving forward, Mrs. Oquist.
It does, President Johnson. I'll just pause and see if there's any other direction or feedback from the board, and then certainly we will continue to move forward with our team here, and then each of our schools to move forward in this direction and to plan for this and get out communications certainly to our staff and to our families early tomorrow.
Great. Any other direction from the board? All right, so that will bring us to the end of item 2. We have multiple items after that, but there's nothing under any of our other committees. Is there anything else that we need to discuss tonight, Mrs. Oquist, under those?
We do not have any additional agenda items for this evening.
All right. That being said, then we are at the end of our agenda. Thank you to my colleagues and the cabinet for the discussion tonight. Thank you to all who may be watching virtually, and we hope to be back with you in the not too distant future. So thank you, and I'll say good evening.